Rise and shine on Australia's Vision Christian Radio.
Yeah, we're running back to the Bible, Phil. Now, yesterday we did Acts chapter 17 when Paul went to the cultural capital of the world of his day. So he's in Greece. Greece, very influential in the Roman Empire through culture, through their political systems and their philosophies, their ideas about science and math. So this chapter, Phil, he journeys down from Athens down to Corinth, which was a seaside port city, which was also very prominent in ancient Greece.
And it's cool because as we journey through Acts, you're going to meet and see the places where he's writing letters to, where Paul writes letters to, which are some of the rest of the New Testament. So this is set in Corinth, where the Corinthian church was, and we have these letters, 1st and 2nd Corinthians. So when you're reading those letters to that church, you'll be able to put it in context. Hey, these are the guys that you meet when you're in Acts 18 with us here. And so we see Paul, he leaves Athens, he goes to Corinth, and he meets a couple of Jewish believers called Aquila and Priscilla, his wife. So they're going to become quite influential as well. But I actually love this little piece here. There's a line here which we talk about. I do some teaching, some lecturing at CHC, and here we talk about this when we're teaching business students. Paul lived and worked with them, for they were tent makers. And it's cool here, you see a little picture of how Paul went about his ministry. And it's interesting because he actually had a trade. He was a tent maker. And it was hard work, I believe, Andy, at the time.
Yeah, and it just shows he was a hard worker, you know. I mean, sometimes he probably lived off the donations or the generosity of the people of God, but other times, like you said, he was willing to work. We also see Paul in other scriptures say that he fought wild beasts at Ephesus, which is kind of like the gladiator game. So I see Paul as a man's man. And even our last Bible story was when he was shipwrecked on Malta. And as a church leader, he didn't sit down and get his boys to do all the work for him. He got up and was gathering sticks and building the fire. So I see Paul as a man's man. He wasn't afraid of hard work, wasn't afraid to roll his sleeves up. And like I said, here he is in the city of Corinth working again.
He's working hard. And it's interesting because when he writes to the Corinthian church later on in 1 Corinthians, he says, you know what? I was completely within my rights to be able to take donations from you, to be able to take a gift from you during that time. I shouldn't have had to work, but I chose to because I didn't want you to think that I was just coming looking for money from you. So I chose to work. I chose to do that as a blessing. But you know what? You should be honoring those other people around you who are ministering the word to you. It's the right thing to support them in the ministry. So he kind of corrects that or talks to that when he's going into those letters down the track.
Yeah, he does. And the other thing I like about this story is it highlights that Paul, he was no fool. So he went to the strategic city. So Corinth was a very strategic city in between Rome and what we now call the Middle East. So a lot of trade went between those two parts of the world. A lot of ships stopped in Corinth. So it was a very multicultural, vibrant city, a lot of sailors in port, you know what sailors get up to.
Yeah.
And so that's where he goes. And like you said, he births this incredible church called the Church in Corinth, which 2 whole letters are written to this church because it's so full of new Christians with issues and challenges and trying to walk out of their old life. And it's interesting, isn't it, that Paul didn't just go to tiny little villages that were obscure. He went to the big cities. He wasn't afraid to tackle the big cities, the big issues with the big, sins and the big devils and everything else. He just went there. He went hard with the gospel and saw thousands of people get saved.
He did. And it says here, just like he'd been doing elsewhere, he first went to the synagogue, which I find really respectful. He went and he offered the word of God and told them about Jesus. And then it says when they said, no, that's not for us. I love it here. It says he went right next door to the home of a Gentile who worshipped God, who said, let's go next door. Here I go. And started spreading the good news there. But there's a moment here where there's a vision for Paul, and God speaks to him and says, don't be afraid, speak out. Don't be silent, for I am with you. No one will attack and harm you, for many people in this city belong to me. And so he stayed there 1.5 years, and that was the time where he worked, but he also was able to preach the gospel and build up that church, which is wonderful.
Yeah, so good. Jesus appearing to him and just strengthening him. Paul's just an amazing guy, and that's why I do enjoy reading the book of Acts. And we continue on this story. He then goes back to Antioch, which is back in the Middle East. And then this other character appears in the scriptures, Phil. His name is Apollos. It says he was born in Alexandria, which I believe is in modern-day Egypt, an eloquent man, mighty in the scriptures. And then he goes up to Ephesus, and this is our first introduction to Apollos.
It is, and it's cool because at that point, Priscilla and Aquila, they've spent some time with Paul, and Paul's been teaching them, and they come and see Apollos, and they're like, this man is gifted by God, but he hasn't been instructed in the ways of the faith. At this point, he just knows about the baptism of John the Baptist. So that's some pretty early stuff. So they take him aside, which I love. They're not doing it publicly.
Yeah.
They're taking him aside and say, hey, here's some more information. And as a result, we do see, and as you're reading through those letters from Paul, he mentions Apollos quite a bit.
He does.
As being someone very influential in the church. And so we see some of these other people as part of Paul's team come together.
Yeah, and it's a lesson for all of us, isn't it? To, like you said, be willing to disciple people, mentor people, not just in public, but behind the scenes.
That's right.
And that's God's way. So we can all have a big impact on people. If you see someone young and zealous in your church, maybe, or on fire for God, never be afraid to get them around for dinner or a meal or a coffee or something and just chat to them, encourage them, and just share part of your journey with them, because you could really encourage that young person to just sort of go for God wholeheartedly for the rest of their lives.
It makes a big difference, doesn't it, Andy? I'm trying to think in your own life. I'm sure there have been people who have done that for you.
So many.
And so to be that person to someone else is incredible. Look, that's Acts 18.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.